Are your ulcerative colitis symptoms proving difficult to manage? Tremfya guselkumab can help you manage the cycle of UC symptoms. At 1 year, many patients taking Tremfya achieved clinical remission, and some patients also achieved endoscopic remission. Individual results may vary. Tremfya is a prescription medicine used to treat adults with moderately to severely active ulcerative colitis. Serious allergic reactions and increased risk of infections may occur. Before treatment, your doctor should check you for infections and TB. Tell your doctor if you have an infection, flu-like symptoms, or if you need a vaccine. Ask your doctor if Tremfya can help you manage the cycle of UC symptoms. Call 1-800-526-7736 to learn more or visit tremfyaradio.com.
Hiring shouldn't be a hassle or a drain on your budget. Upwork is your one-stop shop to find, hire, and pay top freelance talent, saving you time and keeping costs in check all in one place. Do you know the secret to businesses that are scaling faster than ever? Well, they're using Upwork to tap into a diverse pool of skilled freelancers across various industries. With more than 2 decades of experience with a simple and ambitious goal to pioneer a better way of working. Posting a job on Upwork is easy. With no cost to join, you can register, browse freelancer profiles, get help drafting a job post, and even book a consultation. From there, you can connect with freelancers that get you and can easily hire them to take your business to the next level. Upwork makes the entire process easier, simpler, and more affordable with industry-low fees. Visit Upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That's Upwork.com to post your job for free and connect with a top talent ready to help your business grow. That's UPWORK.com. Upwork.com.
If you work in quality control at a candy factory, you know strict safety regulations come with the job. It's why you partner with Grainger. Grainger helps you find the high quality and compliant products your business needs to inspect, detect, and help correct issues. And the sweetest part is, everyone gets a product that's as safe to eat as it is delicious. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
What's up, babes? And as the puck drops, the words that DC fans have been waiting to hear since 1974, the Washington Capitals are the 2018 Stanley Cup champions. It's not a dream. It's not a desert mirage. It's Lord Stanley, and he is coming to Washington.
Welcome back to Japers Rink Radio. I'm your host, Greg Young, and today we have playoffs. And so, as in a Japers Rink tradition, that means we need to bring on the Washington Post beat writer to preview the first round of the playoffs. So I figure no one better else to have than Bailey Johnson. So Bailey, how you doing today?
I'm great, Greg. Thanks for having me.
Of course. All right, so let's start in the micro here. We have a lot of injury things that have happened and that have not happened. So let's start with the probably, I'm going to say, on the more positive side. Logan Thompson, kind of where are we at on his availability? Is there a thought that he might start in game one, or kind of what's the expectation right now?
It's certainly possible that he will start in game one. Spencer Carberry basically was like, you'll find out when whoever leads them out of the tunnel for warm-ups, which is exactly what I expected him to say. Logan's been skating with the full group for a little bit under a week now. His first team practice was Tuesday on Long Island. He skated with the group every day since. Seems to be more of his usual self around the rink when it comes to, cracking jokes and seeming like he's feeling good. So there's certainly a chance that he will start game one, and it seems like he's in a good spot, but you never really know with that kind of thing until they actually play a game.
Yeah, and it's interesting to note that the Bears just announced that they were loaning one of their goaltenders, Seth Alisi, I guess, back down to South Carolina, so which would seem to indicate that there might be a Hershey goaltender heading back, but we'll obviously have to see exactly what the deal is there.
I actually will stop you on that and say that doesn't indicate that. Hershey has a bye for the first round of the playoffs, so they don't need a goalie there for the next 10 days. So
fair enough. Okay, all right. Well, I stand corrected. All right. Okay, so then let's get a little into the more kind of unknown territory. Alexi Protas apparently skated a little bit today and took some shots. I will say in the skating, the clip that I saw posted, I didn't see much stopping and starting. So kind of where do we think we're at on Alexi Protas right now?
As far as I know, this Sunday morning was the first time he's been on the ice, so certainly not in the mix for game one. And I would be surprised if it's round one at all, depending on how long the series goes. It's a fairly significant skate cut that he has to the top of his left foot. It's been a little bit more than 2 weeks since that happened. Again, Sunday, first time he's been on the ice. I think they've been trying to work with the skate and see how they can get him comfortable and see what he can do. But I think it's going to be a little bit of a longer process to get that all sorted out for him.
For sure. All right, then now let's go into the real unknown, Martin Feravari. So it was interesting because he appeared to, I guess, twist his ankle, it looked like. And then he finished the rest of the game against the Islanders. I thought looked okay. And then hasn't, I guess, been really heard of or seen since then. So do we have any idea on the status of Feravari?
We really don't. I know that it's a lower body injury, and I can tell you that I've been told that it's not the ankle that he twisted in that game.
Oh, interesting.
So really have no idea what it is, what it could be, what's going on with him. Like you said, he hasn't really been seen or heard of since. He hasn't skated with the group since that game on Tuesday. I haven't seen him around the facility or anything. So really have absolutely no idea what's going on with him.
Okay. All right. Well, so we breezed through this pretty quickly. I guess any other lingering injury things or anything that you're hearing, because I know that Chychrun took a puck last practice to the head. He seemed like he was back. There's questions about John Carlson and Matt Roy. They both have, I think, been full participants. Anything else the Caps fans should be aware of?
Nope, nothing else. Everybody other than the guys that everyone knows about seems to be full go. Carlson definitely took the last couple of games off and seemed like he might have been working through something, but he's been a full participant in practice the last 2 days. Ran the power play, did all those usual things. Today on Sunday, Chychrun is fine after the puck. Matt Roy was just sick for the last game, so he's all good.
Okay. Fair enough. All right. Okay. That was nice and easy. So then the question, I guess, that is interesting is that, there's, I think, been the normal kind of call ups and call downs, nothing all that shocking. But Ethan Bear is now in Washington. And I'm a little curious kind of what it's interesting because they had been, going with Dylan McElrath and Alex Alexiev for a while. So what does Ethan Bear bring? What exactly, how does this fit in, like, kind of mix wise with him coming to DC?
I think the ideal plan is, with all, no offense to Ethan Bear, that he doesn't play at all, right? He's up to be the 8th, 9th defenseman and fit in, where he can on the edges. I do think that against a skating team like Montreal, with the speed and skill that they have, someone with the skating ability of Ethan Bear is a good option to have around, as opposed to a Dylan McElrath, who has done great things for the Capitals this year and is a really valuable presence in their locker room, but he would tell you himself he's not super fast and never has been, and certainly isn't at this point in his career. So especially if they were to need a defenseman for those road games in Montreal where they don't control the matchup, having someone like an Ethan Bear who hasn't played in the NHL this year but did have a really strong year in Hershey in the American League. I know he was the Bears MVP. He was a second team All-Star for the season, had a good year down there, and he's a good skater. That's one of his best traits. So having someone with that ability is a good backup option for them to have around.
Yeah, I remember, I think I saw a stat somewhere that the Hershey Bears had a plus 33 goal differential with Ethan Bear on the ice, which is a pretty good sign. So that would seem to make sense. And I guess, I guess probably a backup plan, right? Because the other thing is Feravari is a left shot, right? So it wouldn't be, Ethan Bear wouldn't be the logical replacement. That would be Alexiev for him, right?
Yeah, Alexiev has been skating with Trevor Van Riemsdyk, who can play both sides, and has moved over as a result of playing with Alexiev right now. So Ethan Bear, just an extra option, skates well, had a good year in Hershey, a little bit of a reward for him, especially with the fact that, again, that Hershey's got this bye in the first round and they don't need him down there right now,
For sure.
Give him a little bit of confidence after a good year he had down there.
All right. Okay. So that's Capitals injury and roster transaction corner. We're now exiting that, and we're gonna kind of finish up the last little tidbits of the season going into the playoffs. So Bailey, heard so many opinions about the Capitals last 3 weeks, and it was interesting to me because I think there was a lot of skepticism all year about the Capitals, and they finally had a little bit of a downturn in play, and then I think a lot of people are willing to write off the Caps as a serious Stanley Cup contender based on kind of this mediocre play since they essentially clinched the number 1 seed. So I guess, like, what do we attribute this bad play to? What does it mean? What kind of, is there a bigger meaning from this? Is there not? Help make sense of this for me.
I really don't think there's a bigger meaning to it. Obviously, what they were doing with the Ovechkin record chase had them distracted. And then even when that's done, they played a good game against the Carolina Hurricanes that clinched them the number 1 seed in the East. And after that, they didn't really care. And it's kind of hard to fault them for that. I don't know that I could get super excited about playing the New York Islanders on a Tuesday in April. Were
you excited to cover that in there or not
even?
I
was not. I was thankful for Dylan Strome's hat trick to give me something to write about in an otherwise pretty boring game. And I was thankful for Clay Stevenson's debut in Pittsburgh to give me something to write about in a game that otherwise didn't mean anything for either team. But I think it's hard to ask them to get in playoff mode in games that are very much so not playoff games and really don't matter. And they're also don't want to get hurt and don't want to be in a bad spot individually heading into the playoffs. Now, there have been some concerns with team play kind of up and down throughout the season. There have been points where Spencer Carberry was really concerned and kind of took them to task about it, and they rebounded. He has a little bit taken them to task over the last few days about how they finished the regular season. You could tell he wasn't thrilled, but also, again, understands the difficult and weird position they were in where the games meant absolutely nothing and they just wanted to get to game 1. I wouldn't say I'm overly concerned about anything. The energy around the team is really positive. They're really fired up for this game. They're really excited to play a game that means something when they haven't really played a game that had any meaning in give or take a month. It's been kind of a weird stretch where they were playing teams that were fighting for their lives. They were already locked in, secured, dealt with a couple injury things along the way. Pierre-Luc Dubois said after the Pittsburgh game, yeah, we can sit around and pretend that let's pretend that it's a playoff game. But the fact of the matter is it's just not. And I thought that was sort of an honest and interesting way of looking at it. Like, he's exactly right. Sure, the fans want them to play well and want them to beat Pittsburgh, and they would have loved to have won that game, but they were not going to risk putting anybody in a bad situation for game 1 to win a meaningless game 82.
Exactly. And it's I always enjoy Pierre-Luc Dubois because I think sometimes he gets these quotes that are a little maybe like 20% more honest than maybe your average NHL player. So I always kind of appreciate that. But we are now in a position where they do, I guess, have to kind of flip the switch back. So that has been a question that Caps fans that has kind of perplexed the Washington Capitals for a long time, right? Because this is not the first Capitals team in the last 15 years in the Ovechkin era to have clinched a playoff spot and have a lot of meaningless hockey to play in late March and early April. So what exactly how are they going to flip the switch? Like, what's the plan here? And, is this even something that's possible, do we think, at this point?
So I thought Spencer Carberry gave a really interesting answer when he was asked that exact question on Saturday. He said, of course, they'll flip the switch when it comes to the intensity and urgency level, and there's not a player in that dressing room that isn't super fired up for this game. However, that doesn't mean that the switch instantly gets flipped in terms of execution when they've been a little out of practice and a little bit shaky lately. So he basically was like, they're absolutely going to play hard. They absolutely care. They're absolutely going to do everything they can. Are they going to play at their absolute best in terms of execution? Maybe not. Maybe it takes them a game to kind of get their touches back and get their feet back under them and remember what it feels like to play good hockey in a game that matters. So I'm really interested to see how they come out. I'm not at all concerned about, just like Spencer, their intensity, urgency level of care about playing in the playoffs. A lot of the guys on this team were in the team that got swept last year, and that left a bad taste in their mouth. Spencer has brought up a couple times in the last couple of days too that, nobody outside the organization really picked the Caps to be a playoff team this year. So even though they are the number 1 seed in the East, they are leaning into, just like all sports teams do whenever they can, the nobody believes in us, manufacturing some doubters. And there are doubters, especially with how they played down the stretch. So I think you'll see them come out hard. Will they look like they're absolutely clicking at the top of their powers right away? Probably not. But I think they also have the luxury of a matchup with Montreal, where there might be some players on that team who got a little bit overwhelmed by the moment as a younger team with some guys going through this for the first time. And it gives them, sort of the best possible opportunity to not ease into it, because they're not going to ease into it by any stretch, but, get their game back while playing an opponent that's not maybe the toughest they could have faced.
For sure, and that makes sense. So I guess let me I have one more question before break, and then we'll take a quick break and then really dive in on the matchup here a little bit. But I guess I'm a little curious, how much pressure is on the Washington Capitals right now, in your kind of opinion? Because I think if you were to take it at the start of the year, even making the playoffs would have seemed like an accomplishment. But it seems like now there's at least some pressure to at least win this round, right? And so what kind of pressure is there on the team right now in your view?
I wouldn't say it's pressure necessarily. There certainly is an expectation that they beat Montreal and that they get out of this round. I mean, they haven't won a playoff round since they won the Cup. So And this is certainly the best team they've had since then, and the team that seems to be best positioned to do that, especially with the matchup they have against Montreal as well. So there's certainly an expectation that they get out of it, but they're very much, and it's so cliche and it kind of drives me nuts, but it's been almost 2 years, that they are very much a like one game, one day at a time team. That is Carberry's ethos from the top down. And as frustrating and cliche and sort of hackneyed as it is, it really is how they look at things. So while yes, they know that, this could be a 2-month journey if everything goes according to plan and they could have 4 rounds ahead of them, they're mostly worried just about Monday night right now.
For sure. That kind of calls back the old Davey Martinez go 1-0 every day, which sounded great when they won a World Series, and then they started being terrible, and then they just didn't go 1-0 enough times, I guess. But all right. With that, we'll take a quick break, and on the other side, we'll dive into the Montreal Canadiens matchup. So stay tuned. Welcome back. Still here with Bailey. And Bailey, one kind of last tidbit that I wanted to go into, but this is a little bit more of a matchup-focused question, is so Alexi Protas, we just speculated, might be well out for the whole series. And yeah, I think that's probably where it's most likely at this point, at least from what I can see. So what exactly are they going to do with that spot? Because to me, it was interesting that, they've kind of had a top 6 forwards, but not necessarily, always put them in the exact same 2 lines. So what exactly is the plan with Protas' spot, and kind of what do we expect the interim solution to be here?
So I think they'll stick with what they've done the last 2 games without Protas, which is Anthony Beauvillier in that spot with Ovechkin and Strome, and then keeping the Dubois line with McMichael and Wilson the same. I think Beauvillier has actually played really well with Strome and Ovechkin. He had 2 of his best games this season on Long Island and in Pittsburgh. They didn't he didn't score, but he looked really fast and brings an element of speed to that line. He has the intelligence to keep up with Strome in that way. He's going to be faster than him, but you have to know where Strome is going to pass it to you. I thought that worked. And obviously the Dubois line has been so strong all year with McMichael and Wilson that will probably be, I would refer to that really almost as the number 1 line with the matchups that they'll take on defensively as well. Mm-hmm. And then the Strome line will have Beauvillier in that Protas spot. Absolutely.
That seems to make sense. And I know that when they traded for Beauvillier, that was one of the kind of talking points that you heard around the team, was that he could also play up in the lineup along with, I think in the ideal Caps rotation, he's probably on the 4th line with Duhaime and Dowd. But, that's one of the benefits, right, is that he can play with skill. So you would think he's not going to at least be totally out of place up there, at least as an interim solution, right?
Yeah, no, certainly not. I mean, he played with Crosby in Pittsburgh earlier this year. He's played on top lines before in his career. You're exactly right. The reason he's the only player they went out and got is because of his versatility and ability to play up and down and kind of anywhere they need him to go.
For sure. All right. So one of the things, I haven't actually heard this talked about this much, but obviously the Capitals were a playoff team last year, just barely, and they were unceremoniously swept by the Rangers. So that is interesting because, Carberry at least has a playoff series under his belt, albeit one that went very poorly and with a roster that was, I guess, obviously overmanned. But what do you think the Caps and Carberry learned from that experience that they can kind of take forward?
It's an interesting question because in some ways, it's hard to learn a lot from getting swept. Spencer kind of talked about it today and was like, I've gone back and looked at it, but how much can you really take when, things weren't they were never really going to go in their favor. But I also think, and Spencer's talked about this at other times this year, though not specifically lately, yes, they got swept. A couple of those games were not as far apart as ultimately the result of a series sweep made it look. So they've taken a lot really throughout the year of how thin those margins are and how one power play or one penalty kill or, one good shift after giving up a goal or that kind of thing can be the difference in a game, managing those swings of momentum and really understanding that especially in a playoff game, you might only get one power play. So that power play really matters. Those are things that they've taken from that and have talked about kind of throughout the year as lessons they've taken. And I'm sure it will continue to be stuff that they focus on against Montreal.
For sure. That makes sense. All right. So let's talk about Montreal for a little bit. Obviously an interesting team because they're, I guess, in a different spot than the Caps in terms of they're very much, I guess both of them are on an upward trajectory, but the Habs upward trajectory is kind of shocking in a way, given that they were supposed to maybe be a lottery team this year. So what challenges do the Habs bring and kind of but on the same token, this is a team that just barely made the playoffs. So what kind of opportunities do the Caps have to exploit against them?
So up front, Montreal's scary, honestly, I think, with Suzuki and Caulfield and now Demidov in and Patrick Laine and Slavkovsky. And I can run down basically all of their forwards who I think are really good, especially Suzuki and Caulfield have given the Capitals fits when they've played them this year. Caulfield always seems to get one or two. Suzuki's had an unbelievable year, and I honestly think it might be one of the most underrated players in the NHL, especially in the States. In Montreal, they know how good he is.
Hard to think of a Montreal player as being underrated, but I guess, in at least in the States, he might be.
Exactly. I think in the States, he's super underrated because, he kind of gets caught up in they're always so all over everybody Montreal thing, and you don't think about him as much. And the Canadiens haven't been super relevant while he's been there, but he is so good. And I think, will rise to the occasion in the playoffs. Demidov is, as Spencer said today, kind of a wild card where they don't have a lot of tape on him, but he seems like a guy who obviously has a ton of skill and a ton of talent. And Spencer said today that he sees him as a guy who's not shy from the moment and, embraces those big stages with all the attention on him. You saw how he played in his debut for the Canadiens in a packed Bell Center and all of the eyes on him. He had a goal and an assist in the first 10 minutes. So that's someone that they're concerned about. Defensively, though, the Canadiens are a little weaker. Lane Hutson is an unbelievably talented player and sneaky a better defender than he gets credit for. But they don't have a defense that you look at and think, that's a big physical veteran bruising. They're really stout defensively. So if the Capitals can play on the offensive side of the puck, get to their forecheck game, do those things that they do when they're playing really well, I think Montreal is exploitable. But if they're caught in a track meet against the high skill forwards that the Canadiens have, it might be a different story.
For sure. All right. And one of the interesting things about the Canadiens so we just had Andrew Berkshire on this week to talk about this a little bit, is that the Habs seem to put all of their three best players on the top line. And maybe you say Demidov now, maybe that's not as much the case, but the Hudson, Caulfield, and Slepkovsky line is in many ways kind of the collection of their elite forwards just in one line. So from the Caps standpoint, who do you think is going to get that matchup? Is it just going to be Pierre-Luc Dubois? Do you think there's going to be some kind of mix? How exactly do you think Carberry is seeing the kind of matchups against that line?
I would expect it to be heavily Dubois and then the Dowd line kind of mixing into that, which is pretty much how they handle those defensive matchups, generally speaking. Yeah. I think you might see it shift to be a little bit more of the Dowd line at home and then go with more of the combination of Dubois and Dowd when they're on the road and don't control the matchup as much, because either one of those lines I think the Capitals would be happy to have out there. They may want the Dubois line in a little bit more of an offensive role, and that's kind of what they've done all year.
And they have two goal scorers on that line too, along with PLD, right? I mean, Wilson and McMichael have both scored quite a bit this year, so that would make sense.
Exactly. So they don't want to, obviously limit that line to just being a defense line, and they haven't been. They've been sort of their two-way line of sort of almost like the best defense is a good offense type of line, where, if Dubois' line is holding the puck and working hard against you, then it doesn't matter if Connor McDavid's on the other side of the ice, which we've seen this year in the one game that McDavid played against the Caps. So I think it'll be a combination of the Dowd and Dubois line that gets that matchup with Suzuki.
No, that's fair. All right. And then I guess I kind of have a Cap-specific question in a playoff context here, which is about Ovechkin. So, obviously he's now broken the record, right? And this is now just pure win maximization standpoint. So do you expect any reduction in Ovechkin's ice time? I know that there's been talk that maybe that could happen a little bit, kind of, especially in third periods or something. Do you expect anything like that? Do you expect just a normal rotation with Ovechkin? Kind of what do you expect his role to be in this series?
I mean, I expect it to be the same as it was in the regular season, which is to say already relatively lower than what it's been in years past as they tried to figure out how to best maximize him at 39 years old. Yes. He played, I want to say, an average of 2 to 3 less minutes a game at 5-on-5 this year. It was his lowest 5-on-5 ice time, I think, since he was a rookie. And Spencer Carberry basically struck that deal with him by saying your power play time isn't going to be affected, but you can be a better player if you're playing in total 15 minutes a night instead of 18, and 4 of those coming on the power play. Yeah. So that seems to obviously, got him the record. It seemed to work. He's had one of his best seasons in a long, long time. And I would expect it to be a similar situation in the playoffs where, I don't think there's any questions about Ovechkin's motivation to win and how badly he wants to help this team, especially after he had a disappointing playoffs last year. But he just can't play 18 to 20 minutes a night at this point in his career. It's just not something that is the best use of anybody's time, least of all his. So I would expect them to keep his minutes kind of where they've been all year.
So, and then one of the other questions I kind of have is, so the Caps have been a very kind of counterattacking team in a way. And, the Habs are an interesting team because obviously they're very fast, but don't necessarily have a ton of size. So do we expect kind of the Caps to just play their game? Do we expect a lot of adjustments against Montreal? And if there are, what do you think those adjustments could be?
No, I really don't expect a lot of adjustments. I think they will play what their game has been all year because they have always been, especially this season, at their best when they play their game and don't kind of get caught up in adjusting to the opponent or trying to play the opponent's game. I think about when they got blown out by the Buffalo Sabres a few weeks ago, and Spencer basically was like, I don't know what it is, but my team has some kind of mental block about playing these fast, skilled teams. They want to get into those track meets, up and down the ice, trade rush chances games, and that's just not how the Capitals play. And if they, lock into what they're supposed to do as far as being that counterattacking team and having a good forecheck and not trying to just trade 2-on-1s all game, that's how they need to play. And that requires them to think more about themselves than they do about Montreal.
For sure. And then I guess one of the other kind of notable differences between the two teams is the role of the Caps' size, especially in the forward group, right? I mean, the Caps are no secret they like their big forwards, and they like them, to ideally also be fast. But the Montreal doesn't maybe have that same dimension to it. So what do we think the role of like size and kind of getting in on the forecheck could play in a series like this against Montreal?
Yeah, I think it'll play a huge role. I mean, the Caps have been one of the heaviest, strongest teams throughout the year, and being able to use that size, especially over a series where you're playing guys, every other night for as many as 7 games, you can really wear down a smaller, skilled team like Montreal with that size and that heaviness. And I certainly would expect the Caps to want to use that advantage that they have there.
For sure. All right. I'm not going to ask you for a prediction because I know that's not always a fair question to ask a beat writer. But let me ask it maybe this way. So if the series is a fast one for the Caps, what do you think is the story for why that will have been the case? And what do you think will have gone wrong if it's a longer series or the Capitals end up losing to Montreal?
If it's a quick series, Logan Thompson's back. He's playing well. They get to Montembeault early, who we didn't really talk about, but is an interesting one for me. He was on Canada's Four Nations team, didn't play, has been good this year, but is young and potentially fallible. And the Caps stick to their offensive game and don't get into the back and forth, up and down the ice thing that the Canadians will probably want to try to do to them. Yeah. If it gets long or they even lose, it's probably because they've gotten into the wrong side of a couple track meets. Guys like Cole Caulfield or Nick Suzuki have gone off. Patrick Laine is also a guy who's had a weird year, but easily could get 3 in a game all of a sudden and kind of be a game changer. And the goaltending has been a problem for the Caps, would be sort of how I would look at it.
For sure. All right. Okay. Well, Bailey, this has been a blast. Thank you so much for kind of coming in, getting us in and out here a little bit. Where can people find you and your various musings on things?
Yeah, the WashingtonPost.com. Great place to find everything I write. And then I'm on Twitter at Bailey A. Johnson _ and on Blue Sky. I think it's just Bailey Johnson. I'm honestly not totally sure. But I'm in the Post's starter pack on there too, if that's an easier way to find me. For sure. And I know that these days I feel like you're posting just as much to Blue Sky as X or Twitter or whatever the hell. Yeah, I pretty much just copy and paste what I post in both places to try to.
Okay. You would think there's got to be an easier solution at some point that someone's going to come up with, but I guess as long as we're in this segmented space, we just have to deal with this annoyance, huh? Yeah. Okay. All right. So if you like the show, please rate, subscribe, review. We do have some exciting stuff to kind of unveil as we go. We have Jay Fresh, JP, Rob Parker, a bunch of kind of different people lined up. And I know that Bailey, if we're in for round 2, hopefully we can get you on right before that. But Bailey, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
So a disclaimer at the end of the show. I just want to clarify that I am not going to be taking money or any form of payment or remuneration for doing this show. There are obviously have been ads in this show, but it's important to clarify due to my visa situation and the fact that I would like to stay in Denmark for at least a little bit here, that I'm taking no money nor any kind of remuneration for this show. So there you go.
If your job at a healthcare facility includes disinfecting against viruses, you know prevention is the best medicine. And maintaining healthy spaces starts with a healthy cleaning routine. Grainger's world-class supply chain helps ensure you have the quality products you need when you need them. From disinfectants and cleaning supplies to personal protective equipment, so you can help deliver a clean bill of health. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.